CGP Grey is a pretty big YouTuber. He's got 5 million plus subs and has been using Obsidian for years. I'm a big Obsidian user, as you can tell. But recently, on his podcast, he did something pretty big, and I want to go through what him and his co-host was talking about. So for those unfamiliar, this is his channel. You can see he doesn't show his face, so I don't actually know what he looks like, but I know he uses Obsidian because he talks about it on the Cortex podcast. And when you go back into some of the longer episodes, specifically some of the app ones, he talks about how he uses Obsidian, how he moved from Ulysses to Obsidian, and the most recent episode, where he was talking with his co-host Myke, there were a few clips in there that I was like, yes, I want to talk about that. So here's the first clip.
What's going on? What does Myke think? And are you going to tell me now? What do you think of Obsidian?
It's game changing.
Oh yeah?
It's
Fantastic.
unbelievable.
Okay.
So what I will say is I've had to change some of my processes a little bit.
Now, to set up this context a little bit, Gray's been talking to Myke about using Obsidian for over a year, and Myke, at this point, has been using Obsidian for 2 months. Now, I've tried to get people to use Obsidian, but there's never really been a reason for them to, and hearing, yes, it works, may think, oh, yeah, Obsidian's a great app. But the reasons why is why I think this is so interesting, and the enthusiasm behind his voice, you may have heard, like, Myke, oh, yeah. It sounded sarcastic to start with, and I was like, oh, yeah, he's just saying that. But no, because of what he says later on.
But the reason I am 100% sold on this is the canvas feature.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, in getting the Sidekick Notepad ready for launch, I set up a canvas.
Now he goes on to explain how the canvas, typically used for note-taking PKN people like myself and BAS people and all the rest of it, all loads of jargony terms, yet throw all those out the window, get rid of it, he's got a product that he's planning on selling and producing, and there are things, notes that he needs about the product. And that's what he's using the canvas for. It's not a convoluted Zettelkasten, atomic notes, insert jargon words here, note-taking system. No, it's just, I need somewhere to dump stuff that I can easily find. And this relates to something else I was listening to earlier, which is about editing, and they were using post-it notes. I may do another video about that, but they were using post-it notes to storyboard the edit. And what Myke was using the canvas for is essentially post-it notes on a wall, but for selling a product. That's not note-taking from the note-taking sort of community sphere that I'm in, and I would imagine most viewers of this are also in. It was just a normal, everyday, hey, I need to dump stuff in somewhere that I can move things around, and that's what the canvas was for. And it's like, yes, that's the point. And then there's this point.
And the thing that's really nice and you know, for listeners that's different about just like a folder with a bunch of notes is that you see the contents of the notes at the same time. To me, this is the big advantage with Obsidian, is the raw information density that you can have on the screen.
Yep.
And the reason this got me going, like really excited, is because one of the people that I'm working with at the moment uses Miro. And they use Miro and there's some notes in there, but you don't get as much information on the screen as inside the Obsidian canvas. Like when you want to add a note, I don't use Miro, so I may be wrong, just like caveat warning here, but they were trying to add lots of notes into the card they had, like the sticky note they had in Miro, and you're sort of limited. You're not limited with the amount of words. Actually, I think you are limited with the amount of words you put inside the side note. But inside the actual card, you're not limited, but it doesn't work like a file, because it's not a file. It's meant to be a sticky note for a couple of points, but the amount of information you can put onto the canvas as a file, as multiple files, as sections of files, it's just so empowering and so freeing, because you can have literally everything. One of the files that I have, 13,000 words inside of the file, but in the canvas, it's just the small bits that I actually need to know about. And that's one of the advantages of using Canvas over something like Miro or a mind map tool. It is words first, mind mapping second.
But anyway, I love Obsidian. Like, I get it now. Like, the thing about Obsidian is I think you need to have a reason first, because the app is so daunting coming to it. And I think it is their need, and I think that it is, I think what they are doing is changing that. I think they want to change that to make the app a little easier to onboard. I think that's pretty important for them going forward, I would expect, right? So anyone can use it for anything.
And that right there is the biggest struggle I've had with comments on YouTube videos. Obviously inside of here, people are like, yeah, but why would I use it? How do I use it? And when it gets to the course and the people that feed back to me in the course that I've got, link in description, is, well, how do I get started? Where do I use it? What's the point? How do I go about using this thing because I'm not a writer or I don't have a note-taking system? They do, it's just not inside of an app like Obsidian. And then how do they transfer from Roam or Logseek or insert note-taking app here to Obsidian? Like, how do I do that? And I think because Obsidian is so flexible, so customizable, it's kind of like I don't know where to start. And the way I started with Obsidian is, like I think most other people, is I already had a system. I had a system inside of Notion, and I just moved it over. But where I would advise most people to start with Obsidian is find something that you're already doing, whether that be note-taking on videos, note-taking on articles because you're an academic, or listening to books or ebooks, or reading something, or if you're writing, maybe it's a blog, and even, I mean, some people may frown at this, but even if you're a content creator, planning out content, the content is writing, just writing an outline or anything. Use it in Obsidian and then see how that works out moving forwards, because creating a product is something I didn't think about. Obviously, I do my product stuff inside of Obsidian anyway, so the course and other products that I create, as well as all the work that I do for said content creator. So all of my project management note-wise is inside of Obsidian, but you need a point to get started, and that's where I wouldn't say the marketing's wrong with Obsidian or bad, but saying it's building a second brain, or it is your second brain. I believe that's on the page. Let me check. Yeah, it's literally right there, a second brain for you forever. If you don't know what second brain means, or you're not in the PKM world, you're not marketing to anyone. Like, this is just a general conversation to a load of the tools for thought, PKM tools, is they're marketing to an industry, which is totally understandable because it's a niche. But at the end of the day, it's a notes app, and it's more than what it says there. How you market that, how you rebrand that, I really don't know. But when you look at Notion and Notion's branding, it's a bit broad. I have my own critiques of it, but people know that you can use it for more than whatever a second brain is, because those people uninitiated to the second brain movement, cult, community, whatever you want to call it, they look at it and go, what in the world is that? And then they scroll down here and they see this graph view, like, what is that? And that brings me to another comment that was made.
Like, if you go to YouTube and you just type in Obsidian, you're met with too much, right? It's like, here's how I learned to look after a baby using Obsidian, right? It's just like, no, this is, I just want someone to tell me this is a notes app.
I completely agree. There's a kind of wacky content world around Obsidian, which is not helpful for a new user. My personal favorite trope of all of these is, hey, let me show you my mind map thing with 1,000. I was like, nobody needs this. This tool is helpful to no one. It just looks cool.
It's like Notion.
And then Myke goes on to talk about Notion and the general productivity app space. I think Gray got it a little bit confused because he was talking about the mind map, but when you actually listen to the conversation, he's referring to the graph view, not a mind map, because a mind map is a community plugin. That's a whole jargon thing in Obsidian, so I understand the misconception, but I completely agree. To an extent, but when, unfortunately, the way YouTube works is people want to, they watch things, I'm just going to say, like, from my experience on my channel, people want to watch things that is fun. I describe this to content creator friends of mine as like, a lot of people want the chocolate, not the broccoli. Like, the broccoli, the boring things, the how you actually do the work, you look at the audience retention and they fly. People get bored, they leave because they don't need that specific thing. And making a video on each specific use case, each specific need, your YouTube channel just won't grow, it won't get traction, and the videos that are out there are good. They are great videos explaining exactly how to do this, but YouTube doesn't push them because people don't watch them. You're much likely to get more views on the best 10 community plugins that most people already know about. You're going to get loads of views on that video, but how to do this really small niche note-taking thing, that's going to be way down in search because you're only going to get 100 people viewing it and nowhere near long enough for YouTube to recommend it, which is why a lot of the development and plugin support for Obsidian, the videos just aren't that popular. So you have to save the links in something like Obsidian. And that's where I think YouTube doesn't help, like, the onboarding of Obsidian, which is why the Discord and the forum are great places to go if you don't get overwhelmed, as I mentioned in a previous video. So it's certainly a struggle how we solve that again. I don't know. I mean, that's a battle between YouTube and apps and content and processes. I mean, processes are not inherently fun for most people to watch.
The app to me now is very approachable. Like, there's just some, like, when you set it up for me, that setup process was too complicated, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was pretty daunting to me because it felt like they were asking me to make some decisions, and I didn't know why I needed to make them. Like, where would you like to store your vault? It's like, I don't know, man. You tell
Yeah.
me, you know?
And this is another great point that I wanted to sort of expand on. When it comes to Obsidian, it's got its own jargon, like most note-taking tools. Backlinks, inlinks, outgoing links, vault, obviously. And for the onboarding process of Obsidian, with the vanilla Obsidian, there is enough to learn. When you get to what I call modded Obsidian, i.e. the community plugins and enhancing your experience, there's even more words to learn. And then as soon as you get into the modded world, you're thinking, okay, CSS, what is that? JavaScript, what is that? There are so many words introduced to you. You're like, I don't want to be a coder. I just want to note stuff down. How you onboard someone to that, I think, obviously is going to depend on the person that you're onboarding and the person's willingness to onboard and go in different directions. But vanilla Obsidian is very simple. It's very basic. It is just a word processor. As I explained to someone from work, like, I mean, they dived in the deep end straight away. But when you start, it is just a word processor. Treat it as a word processor, i.e. you open file, you type words, you open another file, you type words, and it's stored in folders. That's literally it. You don't need anything else. It just works like Microsoft Word. Then if you want to do some more things, then have a look at doing those more things. But unfortunately, I'm guilty of this. You go on YouTube and you see like these videos, data view queries, DB folders all over the place, templater, quick adds, it's loads of jargon. So I'm guilty, but again, referring back to the YouTube thing, YouTube videos need an element of interest, otherwise they just don't get the views, unfortunately. It's like this battle of creating content that's useful, but also content that's viewed enough for people to see it. It's difficult.
It's just for the right kind of person, this is exactly the tool that they need that will really change things for them. Yeah. But it is hard to get into. But also it has the feature of like some of the things that do make it tricky to get into. Like, yes, you can round off the corners, but ultimately the way it's made is also why it's the perfect tool for so many things. So it's like it exists in this tricky world, and it always just makes me think of this Linux program Emacs.
I'm not going to go there because I don't know enough about Linux. I'll leave the link to the podcast in the description below if you want to listen to that section. But I think that's a great example of why Obsidian is so good, but also so hard to get used to, because it's a great tool with loads of flexibility, loads of customization. But the flexibility and customization scare people off. It's like, well, I want to constrain myself to start with using some cognitive load theory, using a worked example or elements from cognitive psychology, restricting things for the brain to think about, or using ecological dynamics. The area that I prefer is constraining the environment by reducing the amount of affordances that you have. So less things to think about, different learning approaches. But in a nutshell, you need to make it easy for people to get in, get started, and go, which is exactly what I'm trying to do with like the course. But the course is my understanding, my learning, and where you start, where you go. It's so difficult to help people through this, and I'm like, so I had to think for a second. But when you're trying to onboard someone to a tool that have so many questions, like, you want them to answer the questions, but they don't know what questions like need answering yet. So it's almost like you need an onboarding questions of where do you want this, where do you want this, where do you want this? But no one wants to do that straight away. They just want to get started. So how do you just get someone started into something like Obsidian? I think there's just going to be an initial pain point. I don't see a way around that. I don't see a way around an initial pain point, even getting into something like Notion or RemNote or Rem Research or AmpleNote or any other productivity tool, really. There is a hump to get over. Even something like Morgan that's extremely easy to get into. You just add your calendar and go. There is still that onboarding sort of like hump to get over. Some of the humps are bigger than others. And I think Obsidian, because of its flexibility, has an initial high hump, but once you're over it, it's smooth sailing and it just works. And that's what Obsidian is to me. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below.